Good evening. How was everybody? Good. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I want to thank Consciousness Hacking, Mikey, who has become a close friend in a very short amount of time, and Valerie. Where's Valerie? Happy birthday. Thank you for all of your work. It's a total honor to be here presenting with my good friend Dae. Dae and I have known each other for a few years, and we've always said we'd like to present something together, but we've not ever had that opportunity until tonight. So this is a significant moment for our relationship. So good to be here with you.
Likewise.
Good. I'd like to just kick off by asking who here has a meditation practice or has experimented with meditation? Good. And just shout out, what types of meditation practice are people here doing? Just shout out some names of practice. Kundalini. Yeah, Kundalini, Insight, TM, Shambhala, Vipassana, Embodied. Good. Integral. Good. So as you can likely hear, there are many, many different forms of meditation. And so part of the intention tonight is to both give you a broad overview of meditation itself, to give you some direct experience about meditation, and then to also introduce to you some of the neurological correlates to meditative practice. Because no matter how long you sit on a meditation mat, there's never going to be something that comes to you to say, oh, the ACC is now activating in your brain. But tonight, we have the opportunity to engage in direct practice, and then with the beautiful guidance and presentation from Dae, to get a sense from what's actually happening in our brains while we're meditating. I like how Mikey framed it. He said there's a play-by-play analysis of meditation and neuroscience, and we really hope to deliver that to you tonight. So thank you for coming. To begin, I'd like to just give a brief overview of how the night will be structured, and then I'll pass it along to my dear brother Dae. So I'm going to give you, to use Mikey's joke, a brief overview about how tonight is going to be structured. From there, we'll actually let Dae give a presentation about what happens in our brain when we actually begin to focus our attention, when we actually begin to concentrate. We have great research now to know exactly what's happening inside of the brain. That'll then be followed from me offering a direct practice, where I'll guide you into, using guided instruction, a precise experience about what it's like to focus your attention and to direct your mind toward an intended object. From there, we'll open back up. Dae will give a big opening presentation around what it's like to begin having a sense of self that's a bit deactivated. And what happens when our self is deactivated is that we have a deeper sense of emotional regulation. So we're not as reactive to things around us. Dae will explain some of the neurological correlates that happen there. And then we'll come back into a larger group and we'll have some questions and answers together. So you'll have 2 theoretical sessions and 2 meditative sessions, and we're going to squeeze all that into 1 hour. Sound good? We're going to keep it moving. Okay. So the last piece of introduction I'd like to say is that meditation in general can be divided into 3 broad sweeping categories. And those 3 categories are often characterized as concentration practice. So concentration is when you learn to tame and focus the mind. This results in a calmer mind and a sense of being able to stay or to hold your attention on whatever the intended object is. So that's category number 1. Category number 2 are types of meditation practice that are designed to give you deeper insight into the nature of your own experience. That means deeper insight into the nature of yourself, but also deeper insight into the nature of reality itself. So we call those insight practices. And then the third type of meditative practice is what we might call generation practices. And these are practices that are designed to cultivate particular states, particular qualities, like loving kindness, like generosity, etc. And so tonight I'm going to give you 2 tastes, and the first is going to be around concentration or focus, and the second is around insight. We're going to give you a bit of a taste and a look into your direct experience and some of the very interesting things that we can discover. Okay, so with that I'll pass it to Dae. And take the floor.
Okay. So I spend most of my career telling neuroscientists about meditation. It's a treat to be able to do the inverse. As Dustin mentioned, the territory we're going to cover tonight falls fairly neatly into the 8-fold noble path laid out in Theravada Buddhism, with concentration, ethical conduct, and wisdom mapping on to attention regulation, emotion regulation, and insight into the nature of experience, mind, and the self. Anyone that has tried to meditate, which it seems like is the vast majority of you, know that the mind is wont to wander, trying to spend 5 minutes focusing on your breath and finding yourself on the beaches of Hawaii or in your last exam. People are off task about 45% of the time from experience sampling. This was done by Killingsworth and Gilbert. Killingsworth is now at Berkeley if you'd like to track him down. And this is unfortunate because the correlations of off-task ideation and happiness are inverse. So the more you mind wander, the less you're on task, the lower your affect. It's actually unpleasurable to do the thing that we seem so inclined to do, which is to float away from what's right in front of us. A recent study from Wilson and Gilbert even showed that people who had previously indicated a willingness to pay money to avoid painful electric shocks, when left in a room alone with nothing to do, would choose to shock themselves rather than sit there and do nothing. So for some of us, our mind is not a very pleasant place to be, which is an interesting evolutionary biology to encounter. Some of the first research into what's going on in the brain when it's not doing anything came from fMRIs. We've been doing fMRI for a few tens of years at this point. And initially, how it was done is you always need to take a contrast between one thing and another. There's not an absolute measure in fMRI. So all the fMRI findings you read are contrasts between this thing and that thing. And initially what was done, and still largely is true, is you contrast things with what's called a resting state. So you just put people in a scanner and you tell them to lay there and don't do anything in particular. Well, as it turns out, what the mind does when it's not doing anything in particular is quite a lot. And it's not only quite a lot, but it's quite a lot of a specific thing. So what's being shown here are different, what are called regions of interest, or parts of the brain on the left. You're seeing the functional correlations between that region and every other region. So you can see along the index axis here, everything is 1, and then you're seeing over time how the functional correlations between regions changes. If you take an average of all that, what you get is something that looks like this. And what this is showing you is that there's groupings of functional correlations where these parts of the brain are functionally correlated with each other much more than they are with anything else. And from this we get what are called networks, which are areas of the brain that tend to work together. So if you were to see that in a 3D, every sphere is representing a region of the brain, and the lines between them are how synchronized they are over time. So based on the tasks that you do and based on just random fluctuations, you'll see that the size and color of that line is changing, indicating that those brain regions are communicating differently. To illustrate that another way, where's my mouse? Oh, this is hard. Let's see if I did that right. Okay, so the black circle that's roving around is called a spotlight, and it's a 4 millimeter sphere. And what it's doing is isolating what are called voxels in the brain, which are 3D pixels, effectively, of brain tissue. And the colors are showing you how functionally correlated every other voxel in the brain is. And what you see is that as it roves in between those lines, there are certain parts of the brain that show functional correlations and other parts that don't. So this is illustrating that when these voxels are active, the voxels within this yellow bound and also over here are communicating with it. They're showing functional connectivity synchronization. And what's interesting is that there's one brain network that at rest is much more active than when you're doing another task. And this is the exact opposite of what most of the brain does. And so It's called a resting state network, and because it seems to be what we default to when we're not doing anything else, it was initially given the name the default mode network. What this is illustrating here is the default mode network in red and yellow, red being medial prefrontal cortex and yellow being posterior cingulate cortex, and then a task-positive network in blue here. And because one of these is a resting state network and one of these is a task-positive network, what you see are sinusoidal-like waves that are shifted in phase. So when one is active, one is inactive. And we call that anticorrelation. Now, what we can do to discover the effect of these different neural networks is, in real time, isolate which ones, so when the default mode network is much more active than the task-positive network, we can probe people in real time to see what's going on with them. So I've highlighted those in red. We can also do the opposite and take when the task-positive network is much more active than the default mode network in green. And if we give people a chance to respond to a stimulus that they don't know is coming, so here's an indicator and you have to push a button as fast as you can once you see it. If we probe people when their default mode network is high, their reaction time is much, much lower than when the task-positive network is high. So this retards your performance. So this is of great interest for when we are doing concentration practice, because we want to be on top of our error monitoring quickly. If you miss the beginning of a thought, you'll likely end up on the beaches of Hawaii or in your last exam, instead of catching that thought at the head and returning immediately to the focus of your concentration. Now, there's two ways that we can increase the signal to noise when we're doing a concentration practice. One of them is to increase the signal itself, like so. But we can also decrease the noise. And you can imagine like a yoga posture. There's a combination between intensifying into the pose, activation, and relaxing deeper into the posture. And through the successive intensification, bringing integrity to the posture, and then relaxation into that integrity, you ratchet yourself deeper into the pose. A similar thing is true of concentration practice, where you intensify on the object and then relax into that intensification. If the only thing you do is increase the intensification, then you're bringing up the total activity of the brain of these competing networks, and things distort when they're too high. So rather, you want to create greater saliency of the target signal, and one of the best ways to do that is to reduce the competing noise. So neurologically, we can imagine the default mode network as the noise signal. This is your internal ideation. This is thoughts about wherever your mind goes when you're not on task. And in opposition, we can think of the activation or the signal noise being these task-positive networks of the brain and the error monitoring networks like the dorsal anterior cingulate, mid-cingulate cortex, and premotor cortex. And fortunately for us, there are extensive and intricate instructions on how to develop better concentration. This is called the 9 stages of the mind stain. And if you know what each of these symbols mean, it's actually very precise instruction on how exactly to do this intensification and relaxation process in order to get to very deep states of concentration with great rapidity. How long was that? Do you want to do the next section or meditate? Okay, then let's, we'll save the rest of this and try meditation.
So in non-neuroscientific language, because I love Dae and his brain is absolutely brilliant, but I also need to simplify things, and Dae probably cringes when I do this, but in non-scientific language, what this means is that when we begin to practice meditation, there is a part of our brain that actually deactivates. And this part of our brain is called the default mode network, right? And so when this part of our brain deactivates, we actually find that we're not spacey and daydreaming like we are for 45% of the time of our life. So we actually spend 45% of the time of our life daydreaming. But when we develop this capacity for meditation, we spend more of our life present to whatever we're doing. We're developing presence, we're developing our attention. And so what I'd like to introduce now is just a very simple way that you can engage in this type of meditation practice. So what I'm going to invite you to do in just a moment, but not yet, is to sit up really straight in your chair. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Good. And then this meditation we're going to do with our eyes closed as just a simple way to block out some of the distraction that sometimes happens from having our eyes open. Okay, so eyes are closed. And if you're sitting in a chair, just sit on the front edge of your chair so you're not leaning back. And if you're on the ground, just allow yourselves to sit so your spine feels straight. And then before you do anything else, just bring a sense of dignity to your posture. So you're feeling a sense of majesty. And just by evoking that particular quality, you'll notice that you sit up a bit taller and a bit prouder than you normally sit. And just 2 or 3 other points for your posture. Imagine that someone has tied a string to the top of your head like they're pulling it upward. And as they pull it upward, just feel the back of the neck elongate. And then relaxing any tension in your face. We unknowingly hold tension in our jaw, in our cheeks, in our brow. And then finally, taking the entire body as a whole, just feel a sense of alert and a wakefulness in the body, but also allowing the whole body to be soft and receptive. So this is our basic meditation posture. Now, the way that this meditation will work is I'll just give you some guided instructions, as I have been, and your only job is to simply follow what I'm pointing out. If you find yourself distracted or lost in daydream, just come back to the sound of my voice, and I'll continue to give you the instructions. For any of you who are already jumping ahead and fearing how long this might be, this will be a short meditation. This will be about 7 minutes or so. So in the center of your field of experience, just allow the inhale and exhale to arise. You don't need to do anything in particular. Your breath is naturally flowing. And at any given moment in time, you're either inhaling or exhaling. And so the first part of this task is to simply notice the fact that you're breathing. One of the easiest metaphors for understanding what it's like to remain with your attention on the breath is this metaphor of driving a car. So when you're driving a car, the first tool that you need to use is the steering wheel. And if you find yourself veering off of the road while driving a car, you simply take hold of the steering wheel and you direct yourself right back onto the road. And in a very similar way, when you turn your attention to the breath, you'll notice that either your mind stays on the breath, which is like the car staying on the road. Or you'll notice that you get distracted by thought, emotion, daydream, sensation. So just like steering the car back onto the road, the instant you find yourself distracted, just take the steering wheel of your mind and direct your attention right back onto the breath. That means that you're noticing the fact in the moment that you're either inhaling or exhaling. So one of the beauties of meditation practice is that there's a cumulative learning effect. No matter how many times you're distracted, just continually steer your mind right back onto the intended object, which is the breath. I sometimes say this is like doing reps at the gym. In this situation, you're building the muscle of your mind and attention. Every time you bring your mind back to the breath, it's like doing another rep. I'm going to introduce a trick to you. So shift your view now so that instead of seeing your breath as an object, rising and falling, take the view that you're in relationship with the breath. You can imagine that the breath is your friend or a lover. Or you can imagine that you're a parent and that the breath is your child and that you're deeply attuning to the breath. So deeply attuned to everything about the inhalation and everything about the exhalation. Every moment staying aware. The moment you're distracted, just returning your attention right back into being in relationship with the breath. The inhalation and the exhalation.
If your mind is staying on the object, you have a quiet default mode network. Just watch for thoughts that arise. Immediately return your mind back to the intended object.
Finish strong. Noticing with reflection, as Dae has just pointed out, that if you're feeling calmer or more concentrated, that you've quieted your default mode network in your brain. In your direct experience, you'll notice it as a calming and as a focused attention. Good, and then just gently opening your eyes. Take a deep inhale into your belly. And exhaling out. Good work. So the way that this style of meditation works is that I give very particular instructions, but then there's a feedback loop. So the way that the feedback loop works is that we like to hear about your experience. So we're just going to take 3 minutes or so to see if there are any comments about what that was like. Did you find that it was simple to actually stay on that meditation object? Did you find that you were distracted every few seconds? Did you find a deeper sense of calm? Did you find a sense of agitation? There are all kinds of phenomenological descriptors we can use, but we'll take 2 or 3 minutes. So I'd love to hear from people. And I think we have some mic runners walking around.
For me, my name is Jafar. For me, the most vivid thing whenever I do like a meditation is the moments right after, when I open my eyes and how calm and like focused I am right afterwards. That is when I feel like, oh, I think it worked, kind of thing.
Well, that's so if everybody could hear that. So it's the moments when Jafar opens his eyes, he can see that noted contrast between his usual consciousness and the consciousness that's present for him post-meditation. So thank you. How about this particular practice? I'd love to hear how it unfolded for you. There's one in front, and we're here. Sure.
Hi, I'm Ying, and for me, like, I had a lot of vivid imagery, and it wasn't really about memories or anything like that. It was just as your voice was talking, like it was just creating lots and lots of imagery, and it was really relaxing. But also, like, I'm trying not to like look at them too closely.
Good. It's like driving a car and seeing like beautiful landscapes. You can get distracted even from beautiful imagery. Were you able to notice that and then direct your mind back to the breath? Good, excellent. Yeah, good. That's the practice. Good. Hear from just 2 more people. Seems like we're taking the back jacks question. Yeah, we'll take one from you next. Go here first, and then we'll go there.
Thanks. I'm Aliza. I have a very embodied physiological experience. So as my default mode network starts to calm down, it actually feels like my body starts to cool down. It's like an inflammation response starts to dissipate. So I feel less inflamed almost.
Yeah. Does anybody else have the experience of feeling more embodied after taking just a moment of practice like that? Yeah. It's a very common experience. Good. We'll take one more, and we'll keep things moving. Maybe one down here in the middle.
Yeah, so for me, there were 2 things that were happening. I'm used to meditating alone. I do it every day. So I had to actually get used to the voice. And the second thing is, by the way, my name is Abi. So first thing I wanted to say was that it was a bit hard for me to actually listen when I meditate because I'm used to meditating alone. But what actually made a lot of sense was connecting with breath, as a friend or as a lover. I've never actually tried that, and it's immediately worked for me. Like I felt like I was more connected. Yeah, it was
Beautiful.
really nice.
Thank you. One of the things that we find happen is that for many people, meditation becomes boring. It sort of loses some of the life force and some of the juice. But if we actually introduce this idea of being in relationship with our breath as lover, as child, as friend, it adds something. It's that you're not necessarily practicing alone, but it adds a certain spark to it. So I encourage anybody who's at some point in time tried meditating with your breath but found it too boring or found that it wasn't working for you, try this idea of using your breath and being in relationship with it, because it's useful. Great, thank you. Okay, we'll move on, and I can't wait for the next meditation. You guys are in for a treat.
Louder. Great. Feel free to stop me at any point if you can't hear. Okay, so extended practice doing the sort of thing that we were just doing As Dustin said, there's the metaphor of working out. The brain, obviously not a muscle, but it is plastic, and so it reshapes itself both functionally and structurally with use. So when you practice something cognitive over a while, the brain adapts to do that thing better. So we see with extended meditation practice focusing on attention that people show improved conflict monitoring, visual spatial processing, working memory, and executive functioning. We see that there is enhanced information processing efficiency, and this is evidenced in part by reduced attentional blink. Attentional blink is if you show someone a very rapid procession of images, they're able to pick out target images pretty darn well, even when they're only displayed for a very, very short time. Attentional blink is if there's two target images. If you show them very close to each other, people are very good at picking out the first one, but they'll miss the second one. And this is because noticing something is cognitively taxing. It requires resources. So when you notice the first one, you're then blind to the second one because you don't have the cognitive resources to devote to it. What we see with extended concentration practice is that people begin to pick out that second image. So greater cognitive efficiency when it comes to awareness. We also see that there's reduced perceptual biasing. Perhaps many of you have seen the very famous black gorilla video. So at least some of you, I can show it to you during the breakouts if you haven't, but this is an instance where you're looking for something in particular and it makes you blind to the thing that you're not looking for. Meditation practice makes the thing that you're not looking for also appear in conscious awareness. And the last one was from the section that I didn't go into. So we've talked about the fact that the default mode network seems to be involved in off-task ideation. You put someone in a scanner, they're not doing anything particular, their brain's very active in this particular network, they're mind wandering. Well, after some time, it was discovered that this neural network, this off-task mind-wandering network, looked a lot like the network that's involved in self-referential processing. So if I give you a list of adjectives and ask you to first consider, do these adjectives apply to you? Handsome, greedy, selfish, a good dresser, whatever it may be, and then I give you that same adjective list and ask you if they apply to the President of the United States, that contrast pops out something that looks a lot like the default mode network. And so what we can kind of then reasonably make a hypothesis about that we go and test is, well, when people are doing nothing, laying in a scan, or they're mind wandering, what are they mind wandering about? It's themselves. Pretty consistent with most people's experience. It's also been found that, and I should mention there are slight parcellations within that network. There's a lot of overlap. They're not exactly the same. We see different parts of different regions observing different things, but there's a lot of overlap. We've also seen that default mode network activity is correlated with emotional reactivity. So when someone's really craving a cigarette, we see the posterior cingulate cortex, one of the major hubs of the default mode network, come online very strongly. The default mode network is associated with depression, which that psychopathology, of course, rumination is a huge piece of it. Rumination being the habitual running over of a self-referential, usually negative thought. And also OCD, which again, habitual ideation. And so if we consider these the three of the functions of the default mode network, positive correlations with default mode network activity, we can begin to make hypotheses about interactions between these psychological functions. So discursive attention and emotional reactivity. As depression might indicate, if you are caught up in something that's emotionally valenced, you might have a very hard time concentrating on something that's not that. It keeps stealing your mind. And indeed, we see that there's a non-orthogonality between attention and emotion. For instance, low attentional engagement means that emotional interference is much more possible. there's interaction between emotion and attention in several brain regions, including the ACC. And as we've already mentioned, off-task ideation is associated with reduced happiness. But what about this third one, the self and its relationship to attention and emotional reactivity? Well, it should be of great interest to all of us that these three topics are all targets of meditation. In Buddhist psychology, the investigation of what is the self, in addition to the other things that we've been talking about, bettering concentration practice so that you can look at the nature of reality, and bettering your emotion regulation and self-control capacities. And so it might be reasonable to expect that meditation targets all of these. And indeed, across the three types of meditation that Dustin discussed, which are the concentration practices, did you talk about this? Yeah, the generation practices and the insight meditation, we see that there's a common neural signature, which is deactivation of the two major hubs of the default mode network, the medial prefrontal cortex and the posterior cingulate cortex. So moving from left to right, we have green is the insight meditation practices, red is the generation meditation practices, and blue is the concentration meditation practices. And on the brain, the blue indicates that that is less active in meditation than in a resting state. In addition, during meditation, we see that there's functional connectivity changes in both advanced meditators and novices, specifically within the default mode network. So the posterior cingulate cortex becomes more associated with task-positive regions, such as the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex and the dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex bilaterally. And what's very interesting is that while both novices and highly experienced meditators show this functional connectivity during meditation practice, the advanced meditators also show this connectivity during resting state, which the novices do not. So this might be some evidence for the transfer of a state practice into a trait. Based on this finding, Judson Brewer, one of my mentors, used what was then a fairly novel technique, real-time fMRI, to investigate in real time what the experience was like for people as these regions came online and went offline during meditation practice. And then to see if people could use the real-time feedback from these regions to control these neural networks with meditation. What the top graphs are showing here are the first and fourth run, 1 minute runs each of a novice meditator. Red is activation of the posterior cingulate cortex and blue is deactivation. And we see that the novice meditator is showing a lot in the red, which means that even though they are trying to actively move that signal into blue, which is relative deactivation of the posterior cingulate cortex, they're having a hard time controlling their brain. A lot of it's above the line. In contrast, the experienced meditator seems to have an easy time with this, and by run 4, they only have one little spike into the red. Unfortunately, fMRI is a hard technology to port. It's extremely expensive. It requires this giant scanner. And so we tried to take this signal into an EEG setting. This is a 128 lead cap, and people have been trying to do neurofeedback with EEG for meditation for as long as meditation and EEG have been around. It's very hard. What we did here was use what are called beam-forming algorithms to source approximate signal from the posterior cingulate cortex, which is a recessed region, so it's additionally very hard to get at. What you're looking at here is that signal being extracted from those surface level electrodes. In the green is a baseline task that calibrates the signal. Red is when we ask the subject to think of something anxiogenic or anxiety generating. And then blue is when we ask the subject to then meditate, and we see that this brain region is tracking that person's experience fairly closely. So the insight meditation practices don't focus directly on emotion. Rather, it's designed to expose the inner workings of the mind. Buddhism is very much a subjective empiricism where you investigate your experience as it arises moment by moment. And part of that is understanding generation of a self concept. The consequence of that is, well, I should say it's hard to measure self in someone. There's various ways that you can try and get at it. But one way to look at the effects of meditation practice is to look at emotion generation and emotion regulation, since we know these things are all connected. So what we see is that, first off, awareness of emotional stimuli determines the behavioral consequences. So if you, in a very rapid succession, show someone a negatively valenced face, you can change a flash so that they either become aware of having seen that face or not. In either case, we can track the activation of their amygdala, which is a very responsive region to threat conditions. Whether they know that they saw that stimulus or not, their brain responds. Very interestingly, if they don't know that they saw it, they then show aversion to novel neutral faces. If they do know that they saw it, they don't. So if you become aware of an emotion, it changes the behavioral outcome. Whereas if you're just subconsciously cued, these behavioral mechanisms begin to come online that, in this case at least, made someone much more defensive, much more prone to negative reactions to things that they were exposed to without ever having known why. So meditation is associated with greater introspective accuracy. People that practice body scans, you can take them in, and they're able to pinpoint where on their body you're touching them with greater precision than people who haven't. And meditation state increases self-reported emotional intensity. Very interesting, because many people think, and probably not this crowd, that meditation kind of reduces your emotion to this baseline, and you're just, copacetic, equanimous, and never experience any of the spectrum of human experience. But this isn't what we see. Rather, we see that people show greater response to emotion, both in terms of self-report and in terms of the peripheral physiology that we can measure. Simultaneously, while you're experiencing these emotions more dramatically, your reactivity to them decreases. So to put it in simple terms, you're better at surfing those emotions. They impede your cognition less. You're less averse to experiencing them. So in the first study here by Taylor et al. In 2011, people were briefly trained in meditation and then shown disturbing images from the IAPS image set. And people, while their brains reacted as much in the amygdala, people who had been trained in meditation showed less default mode network activation and reported less emotional reactivity. In the second study, it was found that mindfulness was able to decouple the experience of cigarette craving in people that were trying to quit from smoking behavior. So while people were still experiencing a craving sensation, that didn't translate to behavior. They were able to just be with that emotion as it was arising without then needing to reactively respond to it and go smoke. And in what I think is a tour de force on the topic, it was shown that meditation enhances sympathetic concern for and reduces aversion to the suffering of others. So people were given a 3-month training which focused largely on compassion, after which they were shown emotionally arousing videos. It was found that these people showed increased expressions of sadness, reported being more moved, but showed fewer rejection emotions, those being anger, contempt, and disgust. So while it doesn't decrease the amount of what some people could call negative emotions, it makes you much more capable of being with those emotions, and it changes the nature of those emotions so that you're also much more capable of being with the thing that's eliciting those emotions. So there are some meditation practices that do deal directly with emotion, but what's very interesting, and the thing I want you to take away from this, is that many of these are a byproduct of simply looking into the nature of experience, specifically that sense of you, because that is an actively generated cognitive process. It gets created when you're an infant, and then we're stuck with it for a long time. But with meditation practice, that rarefies quite a bit. And there's some brilliant studies to show this. One of them is V.S. Ramachandran, who did a lot of work on mirror neuron systems. And for instance, he showed that if you anesthetize someone's arm so that they can't feel their own, when they watch someone else get touched, they'll feel it just like they were being touched themselves. So as he says, you're only skin deep, like you're actually constantly feeling everything around you. You're just deciding it's not you through competition with the things that you're deciding are you. But when you relax that active process, that sense of self expands dramatically, and you become much less reactive to the world around you, because you're no longer trying to protect yourself from this thing that you think is out there, because it's all just part of the same thing. So Dustin's going to give us a little preview of that.
All right, so we're on our home stretch, our final 15 minutes. So again, at risk of oversimplifying, the way that I like to think about what Dae is saying is that those people who are meditators tend to have a calmer mind with focused attention and less sense of self-referential thought. Those people who aren't meditators have a wandering mind, have a distracted capacity to focus attention, and are constantly thinking about themselves. So it's a recipe for unhappiness. If you think of it just on a fundamental level, to have a focused mind, to be calm, to be focused in your attention, to not be constantly obsessed with yourself, this is a good thing, not only for ourselves, but you can certainly ask the people around you. They would appreciate it as well. So this next meditation is going to just introduce a sense of spacious freedom into your experience, to give you a taste of what it's like to not be so emotionally reactive, but also to begin to deconstruct the boundaries and borders of our usual sense of self. When we begin to deconstruct the boundaries and borders of our usual sense of self, we start to feel calm, expansive, and deeply interconnected to everything around us. And so you just get a preview. These are just the tips of the iceberg with these practices, but good to introduce them to you. Okay, so again, please sit up nice and straight in your chair. And if you're on the ground, your posture is upright. And please go ahead and close your eyes again for this practice. This will be about a 10-minute meditation. So we're shifting now. This meditation isn't so much about concentration, but it's about insight into the nature of our experience and the nature of our sense of self. So it's that second category of meditative practice. So bring a sense of majesty and dignity to your posture. Sometimes we say that your posture is a direct reflection of your motivation. So if you find yourself slouching, it's often also true that you're not totally engaged in what's happening. So just allow your posture to be a reflection of total engagement. There's an opportunity here over the next 10 minutes to get a much deeper insight into the nature of your own self and the nature of experience. So take it seriously, but lightly. So this is a stage-by-stage meditation. Just follow along. So begin by turning your attention to the sensations of your hands against your knees. And if you're not sitting with your hands against your knees, please adjust your posture so that you are. So as you turn your attention to the sensations of the hands and the knees, you'll notice a gentle pressure. A sense of gravity. And just notice the fact that in order to feel sensation, you also have to be aware of that sensation. So I'm going to use the phrase feeling awareness. So in the sensations of the hands against the knees, just notice the feeling awareness of that gentle pressure. And if you find yourself distracted, just return right back to that sensation, feeling awareness, the hands and the knees. And so for some of you, this may be a good limit for your practice, but I'm going to keep going through a series of stages. If you feel like the next stage doesn't make sense, just come right back to this first point. Sensations of the hands and the knees. Okay, for those of you coming along, see if you can simultaneously notice the feeling of the hands and the knees and the sensations of the sit bones against the chair or cushion. So feeling awareness of the sit bones and feeling awareness in the hands and the knees. So we're shifting from a single band of information processing to a simultaneous band. Feeling awareness in the sit bones, gentle pressure against the chair or the cushion, and feeling awareness in the hands and the knees simultaneously. So you're welcome to stay here and practice. If you'd like to go even deeper, turn your attention now to the entire felt sense of the physical body. So you're feeling the whole body as a single field of feeling awareness. So the tendency is to jump to a particular part of the body, like the hands or the feet or the arms. But your task is to feel the entire field of the body as a single field of feeling awareness. Good, and then turn your attention now to the surface of your skin. You can feel the gentle pressure of the air against the surface of your skin, or the clothing against your skin. And then notice that the single field of feeling awareness of the entire body is slightly larger than the surface of the skin. It's as if your skin is becoming porous with feeling awareness. So you're gently dissolving the boundaries of the physical body. And you're maintaining connection to the single field of feeling awareness that you are. And for those of you who are still with me, just keep following along. Now notice the space above your head. And just allow the crown of the head to open into that single field of feeling awareness. The entire space above the head just open, present. One unified field of feeling awareness above the head, throughout the physical body. A single field. And do the same thing below the physical body. So you're opening awareness below the body. A single field of feeling awareness opening below. It's like you're sitting on a field of feeling awareness. And allowing now the front surface of the body to open. Feeling awareness opening forward. A single field of feeling awareness. We're beginning to deconstruct the assumptions we have about our sense of self and our boundaries. And then opening the back body. So a single field of feeling awareness directly behind the physical body. Just opening. It's like the back becomes hollow. Just open presence, feeling awareness backwards. A single field. And then opening the right side of the body. A single field of feeling awareness opening to the right. The boundaries of the right side of the body dissolve. And opening to the left. The boundaries on the left side of the body dissolve, just opening to that single field of feeling awareness. Now allow your awareness to be open in all directions. A single field of feeling awareness above, below, left, right, forward, and back. If you find any particular aspects of your awareness that don't feel fully open, just give them a bit of extra attention, and you'll notice that they immediately open up. And there are many more stages to this path, but I'm going to leave you with one more. Allow your awareness to be open like a sphere without any edges or boundaries. So if you think you found an edge or a boundary to this feeling awareness, just go check. It'll immediately recede. So drop the directionality and just allow awareness to be open like a single field. A sphere without edges or boundaries. And from this open, spacious awareness, you've begun to deconstruct your usual boundaries of sense of self. And you'll find there's a natural sensitivity to experience that's available. You become more human, deeply connected to your own emotional body and to the emotional bodies of others. And from this expanded, spacious sense of freedom, you'll also be less reactive. Totally available to anything that comes into this field. And then when you're ready, just take a deep inhale into your belly. Exhaling out. And then gently opening your eyes. Good. So we'll just take one or two comments, and then we'll transition to the next part of the evening. And I'll be leading a breakout, and so will Dae, so there'll be plenty of chance to engage further. But any comments about the experience, what that was like for you? If you in the back. No, I think we'll let the microphone come to you so everybody can hear.
Did you put your hand up?
Put your hand up, please. Yeah, good. And you'll notice a drastic difference between the concentration meditation practice, which is designed to build attention, and then this more opening meditation that's designed to give deeper insight into the artificial boundaries that we create in our experience.
Thanks. So the first meditation I found my really kind of sleepy and lethargic. And the second one I felt a lot more re-energized. So I found that to be interesting. And then the second thing that I was...
Can you stand up so I can see you?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
I was feeling a migraine come on. And as soon as I threw kind of that open space to where the pain was, it went away. And that was really exciting.
And how were you able to follow along?
Yeah.
Pretty far?
Yeah.
Good work. Let's take one more. I know Mikey's starting to approach. I don't want to take up too much time. Just one more comment. No. Good back.
Hey, Dustin.
Hey, Chris.
So the experience having was almost like a sense of armor, kind of taken off as you were guiding us to direct attention to the parts of ourselves that were holding that sense of identity. So it kind of felt like energy was being released that was holding my own sense of self. And that dislocation of my own identity was starting to kind of break free and felt much more spacious and, relaxed.
Excellent. Could you get a sense for how there might be less emotional reactivity from this space?
Yeah. I almost felt the release of that emotional reactivity, though, which was kind of that freeing sense.
Beautiful. And as Dae was saying, you get released from the reactivity, but you still stay deeply attuned and sensitive to what's happening. Mm-hmm. Can you still get a sense for that experience now, the openness?
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
For sure.
Right, great. Thank you. Okay, Mikey says I can do a couple more. Just a couple more comments or any questions about that, please.
Could you put your hand up? Thank you.
Yeah, I gotta say, the first meditation practice I think really primed me for the second one, and I was really more able to stay engaged and present in the moment during the second one. And I gotta commend you. I think you did an amazing job guiding us all, or at least judging based on my experience. You did a great job guiding me through just a practice of orienting my attention and shifting it from different place to place and sustaining it. I think you really encapsulated that.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Mikey says one more. The boss, the king has spoken. The one here in front. Or I guess I'm back, sorry. Yeah.
Hey, so I thought that was really interesting. Before you actually went towards the... Can you hear it more? Oh, sorry. So while you were talking about, going into that sphere and visualizing that, there came a point right before you said that where it was automatically turning into that little space, and I could just feel myself sort of fall apart, if that makes sense. And then at the same time, it was like sort of re-energizing itself. So it was like everything was going a little bit faster, and I could feel the energy coming back a little bit faster. So I thought that was pretty curious and interesting.
Well said. And it's worth mentioning that these particular styles of meditation where instructions are pointed out like this are always done where I'm engaging that particular state first and then describing it to you. So this isn't just something that's being orally said, but it's being actually offered through direct experience. So it's very common that people begin to feel the next instruction as it's opened up in direct experience. Great. So I know we have a lot more questions. I'm going to be running a breakout session, so feel free to come to it. I'll be respectful of time, and I'll invite Mikey back up to the stage. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.